Stop for a moment, because the story you have been carrying in your mind may not be the real story. There was a reason this connection suddenly became complicated. There was a reason someone who once felt close began creating distance. There was a reason conversations became shorter, plans disappeared, emotions were hidden, and the connection that once seemed so natural suddenly felt impossible. And now, something has surfaced that changes the entire picture. The truth is not simply that your soulmate chose to walk away. There was pressure surrounding the situation that you could not see from your side. Something was happening behind closed doors, and the person you cared about may have been caught between what they genuinely wanted and what they believed they were supposed to do. For a long time, you may have blamed yourself for the separation. Maybe you wondered whether you became too emotional, whether you expected too much, or whether something about you pushed this person away. You may even have convinced yourself that their feelings disappeared overnight. But there is another possibility. The distance was created long before you understood why. Someone may have influenced the situation. A family member, friend, former partner, authority figure, or person with strong control over your soulmate circumstances could have played a role. The pressure might not have looked dramatic from the outside. Sometimes manipulation does not arrive as an obvious attack. It comes through repeated advice, warnings, fear, guilt, and carefully chosen words. Forget this person. This will never work. You are making a mistake. You need to move on. One conversation becomes another. Another becomes a pattern. Eventually, a person can start questioning their own heart. Your soulmate may have reached a point where they were no longer making decisions from a place of emotional freedom. They were trying to avoid conflict. They were trying to keep everyone satisfied. They were trying to protect their reputation, their family, their finances, their future, or even you from consequences they were afraid to face. And that is where everything became complicated. Imagine knowing exactly who you want to talk to, but being afraid of what will happen if you do. Imagine opening a message, typing something heartfelt, and then deleting it because you suddenly remember all the reasons you were told to stay away. That kind of inner conflict can create silence that looks like indifference. But silence does not always mean absence of feeling. Sometimes it means a person does not know how to handle what they feel. Your soulmate may have tried to convince themselves that distance was the responsible choice. They may have told themselves that time would solve everything. They may have believed that if they stayed away long enough, their emotions would disappear. Instead, the memories remained. Certain places still reminded them of you. Certain songs brought back moments they had tried to bury. A familiar name could suddenly change their mood. They might have found themselves wondering what you were doing, whether you had moved on, and whether there was still any possibility of repairing what happened. And then came the discovery. Something they were not supposed to know may have finally reached them. Perhaps a person admitted something. Perhaps an old message was found. Perhaps a conversation from the past was revealed. Perhaps your soulmate finally connected several events that never made sense before. Suddenly, the pieces started fitting together. The reason for the separation looked different. The story they had accepted for so long began to fall apart. And that realization can be devastating. Because it forces a person to confront an uncomfortable question. What if I walked away because I believed something that was never completely true? That question can keep someone awake at night. Your soulmate may now be reconsidering the moment everything changed. They may remember exactly when communication stopped feeling easy. They may remember who was around them. They may remember the advice they received. They may remember the excuses they used to avoid an honest conversation with you. And perhaps the hardest realization is this: they may finally understand that you never received the full truth. You were left with unanswered questions while they carried information you never had. That imbalance was unfair. You deserved to know what was happening. You deserved an explanation instead of confusion. You deserved more than silence. But now the situation is shifting because the hidden part of the story is becoming impossible to ignore. There may even be someone who knows exactly what happened. Someone who watched everything unfold from the beginning. Someone who remained quiet because speaking up would have exposed their own involvement. That person may no longer be comfortable staying silent. And when one person finally speaks, everything can change. A single confession can destroy an entire false narrative. One piece of evidence can explain months of confusion. One honest conversation can reveal why two people were separated when neither truly wanted the distance. This is why the next conversation could be extremely important. If your soulmate contacts you, do not expect a simple, "I miss you." There may be much more behind it. They may want to explain why they disappeared. They may admit that fear controlled their choices. They may tell you about pressure you never knew existed. They may reveal that someone influenced them. They may confess that they wanted to reach out several times but stopped themselves. And there may be one sentence you never expected to hear. "I never stopped caring." But remember, words alone cannot rewrite the past. If this person returns, watch what they do. Are they willing to tell the complete truth? Are they willing to accept responsibility? Are they prepared to explain what happened without making excuses? Are they actually different from the person who once allowed circumstances to control the connection? Those questions matter more than dramatic promises. Because the purpose of this revelation is not simply to make you run back into the past. It is to give you clarity. You have already survived the uncertainty. You have already experienced the nights when you wondered why someone could become distant without giving you a reason. You have already asked yourself whether the connection meant anything. Now imagine receiving the missing information. Imagine finally discovering that the situation was much more complicated than you thought. That moment could bring relief. It could also bring anger. Both emotions are valid. You can understand someone's circumstances without pretending that their choices did not hurt you. You can forgive without forgetting. You can listen without immediately accepting everything. And most importantly, you can love someone while still protecting your own peace. Your soulmate may have learned this lesson too late. They may now realize that allowing other people to influence such an important decision cost them something they cannot easily replace. Because there is a difference between finding another person and finding the same emotional connection again. They may have tried to move forward. They may have met new people. They may have focused on work. They may have changed their routine. They may have acted as though everything was fine. But eventually, reality catches up with avoidance. When the noise becomes quiet, a person is left alone with their own thoughts. And that is when memories become powerful. Your soulmate may have started comparing everything to what they experienced with you. Not necessarily because every relationship after you failed, but because something about your connection left a mark that they never fully understood. Perhaps they now recognize why they felt unusually safe with you. Perhaps they understand why conversations felt different. Perhaps they realize that they confused temporary circumstances with permanent incompatibility. That realization can create regret. But regret is not the end of the story. The next step is courage. Someone has to be brave enough to tell the truth. And your soulmate may finally be reaching that point. The circumstances that once forced distance may no longer have the same power. A family situation may have changed. A controlling person may have lost influence. Financial pressure may have eased. Your soulmate may have gained independence. Or they may simply have reached an age of emotional maturity where they are no longer willing to let other people make personal decisions for them. Whatever the exact reason, something has shifted. And you may notice it before you receive any direct explanation. A sudden message. An unexpected attempt to reconnect. A mutual person mentioning their name. A social media interaction. A conversation that seems casual but carries emotional weight. The first sign may not look dramatic. It may be small. But the reason behind it could be much bigger. Your soulmate may be testing the waters because they are afraid of rejection. They may wonder whether you would even respond. They may assume you hate them. They may believe you have completely moved on. And perhaps that fear is exactly why they hesitate. Because they know they cannot simply appear again as though nothing happened. Too much time has passed. Too many unanswered questions remain. They know you deserve an explanation. And this time, the responsibility may be on them to provide it. That is why you should not chase the truth. Let it come to you. If someone genuinely wants to repair what was broken, they will make an effort to communicate clearly. You do not need to decode every silence. You do not need to search for hidden signs every hour. You do not need to convince anyone of your value. The person who truly understands what they lost will understand your value without needing to be persuaded. And perhaps that is the biggest transformation in this entire story. Once, you were waiting for someone else's decision. Now, you get to make your own. Once, their silence controlled your emotions. Now, you have the ability to decide what deserves access to your life. Once, you wondered why you were not chosen. Now, you understand that someone else's inability to choose you does not determine your worth. That realization changes everything. So if the truth arrives, listen carefully. If an apology comes, observe whether it carries accountability. If a confession appears, look at the facts. If someone returns, ask yourself whether the relationship they are offering is healthier than the one you lost. Do not accept the past simply because you missed it. Choose what is right for the person you have become. Because you have changed. The person who endured the confusion is not the same person standing here today. You have learned patience. You have learned boundaries. You have learned that love without honesty can become painful. And perhaps your soulmate has learned something too. They may now understand that avoiding a difficult decision does not eliminate the consequences. It only postpones them. The truth eventually demands to be acknowledged. And when it does, people have to decide what they will do with it. Maybe your soulmate chooses courage. Maybe they finally tell you everything. Maybe they admit that they were afraid. Maybe they reveal who influenced them. Maybe they explain the circumstances that made them believe separation was unavoidable. And perhaps, after hearing the complete story, you will finally understand why the person you loved seemed to disappear when you least expected it. But remember this. A revelation is not a command. You are not required to reopen a door simply because someone finally explains why it was closed. You are allowed to decide. You are allowed to take your time. You are allowed to ask questions. You are allowed to protect your heart. And if the connection is truly meant to be rebuilt, it will not require you to sacrifice your self-respect. It will require honesty from both sides. It will require consistency. It will require patience. It will require two people who are finally free to make their own choices. So the biggest news is not simply that your soulmate may still have feelings. The bigger revelation is that the separation may have been shaped by circumstances you were never shown. The story was incomplete. And now the missing chapter is beginning to appear. The people involved may have to answer for what they did. Your soulmate may have to face what they allowed. And you may finally receive the explanation you stopped expecting. Perhaps one day you will look back at this entire chapter and realize that the silence was never the final answer. It was only the part of the story you could see. Behind it were decisions, fears, conversations, pressure, regret, and emotions that remained hidden. Now those hidden pieces are moving toward the light. So do not allow the past to convince you that you were unworthy. Do not let someone else's fear become your identity. Do not measure your value by the way another person handled a difficult situation. You were deserving of honesty then. You deserve honesty now. And if your soulmate truly wants another chance, the truth will have to come with them. Not excuses. Not confusion. Not another disappearing act. The truth. The whole truth. And when it finally reaches you, you may understand something that once seemed impossible. The separation was real. The pain was real. The silence was real. But the reason behind it was never as simple as you were made to believe. The story is changing because the hidden information is finally becoming visible. And this time, you are not standing in the dark waiting for someone else to explain your own life. You are standing in the light. You can hear the truth. You can examine it. And then you can choose what happens next. That is where your real power begins.